had a best friend that felt like your whole world? Someone who made every day special, who understood you without even speaking. I had that person. His name was Ethan, but then he had to move away. I don't remember a time when Ethan wasn't in my life. It feels like we've always been together, like the sun and the sky, or peanut butter and jelly. From the moment we learned how to walk, we were already racing each other down the street. From the moment we learned how to talk, we were already arguing over which ice cream flavor was the best. Ethan and I were neighbors, born just a week apart, and we grew up like two inseparable puzzle pieces. Every morning, he would knock on my door so we could walk to school together. Every afternoon, we would invent new games to play in the backyard. Some days, we pretended to be detectives, sneaking around to spy on my older brother, only to find out he was just going to buy candy. We had a secret spot, a big oak tree in the park where we carved our names. It was ours, our little world. On rainy days, when we couldn't go outside, Ethan would show up at my house with a deck of Uno cards or a stack of comic books. We'd sit on the floor, playing for hours, laughing until our stomachs hurt. I remember how he always let me win, even though I pretended not to notice, and how, no matter what, he always saved the last cookie for me. Even though we were just kids, I was sure of one thing: Ethan was my best friend, and back then, I believed we would always be together. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs, the little things that hinted our world was about to change. It started with hushed conversations between my parents at the dinner table. My mom's eyes looked heavier. My dad's sighs became deeper. I didn't think much of it at first. Grown-ups always had things to worry about. But then, one evening, Ethan and I were lying on the grass, staring up at the sky, playing our favorite game, finding shapes in the clouds.
That one looks like a dragon,
Ethan said, pointing at a wispy cloud drifting by. I squinted. No way, that's totally a bunny. He turned his head to me and grinned.
Mia, you always see bunnies in everything.
I laughed, nudging him playfully, but then his smile faded slightly, and he hesitated before speaking again.
Hey, has your mom said anything about moving?
The question hit me like a cold gust of wind. I sat up, confused. Moving? Number Y? Ethan looked down, picking at the grass between his fingers.
My parents have been talking about leaving. They said we might have to move soon.
For the first time, the warm afternoon sun didn't feel so comforting. My chest tightened. I tried to convince myself it was just a maybe, just a possibility. After all, Ethan had always been here. Why would that change now? I forced a smile and shrugged. Well, if you move, I'll just come with you. Ethan chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
Yeah, that would be nice,
he murmured. At that moment, neither of us wanted to believe it. But deep down, something told me that life as we knew it was about to shift in a way we weren't ready for. After that day, something changed between Ethan and me. It wasn't obvious at first, but I could feel it. Like when a familiar song suddenly sounds different, or when your favorite sweater doesn't feel as cozy anymore. We still walked to school together, but sometimes he'd be quieter. We still played in the backyard, but there were moments when he seemed lost in thought. It was as if he was already halfway gone, even though he was still right there beside me. One afternoon, Ethan didn't come over like he always did. At first, I thought maybe he was busy, but then the next day, and the day after that, he still didn't show up. I told myself I wouldn't be the first to go looking for him. If he wanted to hang out, he would, right? But the truth was, I missed him. So on the third day, I finally went to his house, knocking on his door like I had 1,000,000 times before. His mom answered with a warm smile, but when I asked if Ethan could come outside, she hesitated.
Oh, sweetheart, he's packing right now.
Her words didn't make sense at first. Packing? As in, really moving? Not just a possibility, not just a maybe. Before I could say anything, Ethan appeared behind her, his expression unreadable.
Hey, Mia.
He said softly, "You're really leaving?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He nodded.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow? That wasn't enough time. That wasn't fair. I wanted to say something, to ask him why he hadn't told me sooner, to tell him that this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. But instead, all I could do was stare at him, feeling my chest tighten like someone was squeezing my heart. I should go, I mumbled, turning away before he could see my eyes start to water.
Mia, wait.
But I didn't. I ran. I ran all the way home, past the oak tree where our names were carved, past the sidewalk where we had raced 100 times before. Because if I stopped, if I looked back, I knew I wouldn't be able to hold in the tears anymore. And just like that, the world I thought would never change had already started to slip away. That night, I couldn't sleep, no matter how many times I turned over in bed, no matter how tightly I hugged my pillow. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept replaying the moment at Ethan's door, his voice, the way he looked at me, the way I had run away. Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I ask him to stay? Why did I act like I didn't care when, really, I did more than anything? I threw off my blanket and stared out my bedroom window. From here, I could see the soft glow of Ethan's room across the street. His light was still on. He was awake too. For a moment, I thought about sneaking out, running across the street, and knocking on his window, just like we used to do when we had big secrets to share. But now, it felt different. This wasn't a secret. This was real. What if tomorrow comes and I never see him again? What if he moves to some faraway place, makes new friends, and forgets all about me? The thought made my stomach twist. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward his window, flicking it on and off in our secret pattern. 3 quick flashes, then 2 slow ones. It was our way of saying, "Are you there?" For a second, nothing happened. But then, his light flickered back. He was there. I hesitated. Should I send another signal? Should I tell him I was sorry for running away? Should I tell him I didn't want him to go? But before I could decide, his light went off. The window went dark. And just like that, it felt like he was already gone. I crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket over my head. The world outside felt too big, too uncertain. I wanted to go back to the way things were. Back to when we thought we had all the time in the world. But deep down, I knew tomorrow everything would change. Morning came too soon. The sun rose, painting the sky with soft orange and pink. But to me, everything felt grey. I stayed in bed longer than usual, hoping that if I just closed my eyes, maybe time would stop. Maybe Ethan's car wouldn't be packed. Maybe his family would decide to stay just one more day. But when I finally forced myself to look outside, reality hit me like a cold wave. The moving truck was parked in front of Ethan's house. His parents were loading up boxes. His little sister was hugging her stuffed bunny, looking just as lost as I felt. And there he was, Ethan, standing near the car, his hands in his pockets, scanning the street like he was waiting for something. Waiting for me. I took a deep breath. my heart pounding as I ran down the stairs and out the door. My feet barely touched the pavement as I crossed the street. I didn't want our last moment to be me running away. I had to say goodbye, even if it hurt. Ethan turned when he heard me coming, his face lighting up just a little.
Hey!
He said softly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Hey! For a moment, we just stood there, neither of us knowing what to say. Then, finally, I blurted out, "You should have told me sooner."
I wanted to...
He admitted.
But I didn't know how.
I looked down at my shoes, kicking at a small rock on the sidewalk. I thought we had more time. Ethan nodded, his voice barely above a whisper.
Me too.
Then, without thinking, I pulled something from my pocket, a small, folded piece of paper.
What's this?
He asked. A list. I said, trying to smile. Things you have to remember. Like how we always race to the bus stop. Or how you can never beat me at rock, paper, scissors. Or how this town has the best ice cream shop ever. And you promised we'd go every summer. Ethan unfolded the paper, scanning the words. And for the first time that day, he really smiled.
I won't forget.
His mom called from the car. It was time. So, this is it, huh? I whispered. Ethan hesitated, then reached into his backpack, pulling out something small.
Here.
He said, pressing it into my hand. I looked down. It was a tiny, worn-out keychain, his lucky charm, the one he had carried around since the 2nd grade.
To remember me.
He said, like I could ever forget. I said, blinking away the tears. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I hugged him. A real tight, don't let go kind of hug. And for that moment, nothing else mattered. The car door opened. He stepped inside. The engine started. I took a step back. And then he was gone. I stood there long after the car disappeared, gripping the keychain in my palm. The street felt quieter. The air felt heavier. But somewhere deep inside, I knew that no matter how far Ethan went, this place, our memories, would always be a part of us. And maybe, just maybe, one day, we'd find our way back to each other again.